Hello, welcome to today. Yeah, we're into October here, and it's getting, as you can see, a little fuzzy because it's starting to get a little chilly out there. I'm quite a fan of this season. It's kind of snugsy, and you get to have like lots of tea and soups, and it feels good baking. Baking's a must during this season. But what are we going to talk about today? So, first off, hi, I'm Hilary Hraefn Porter. I'm an intuitive healer and ascension guide and mentor, and I'm here to talk to you about many different things dealing with awakening in the modern world. Today, I wanted to talk about the Clair Senses, the 8 Clair Senses, but we're only going to talk about 4 today, but 8. It's interesting because there's the ones that we know, like your clairsentient, your clairempathic, what's the other one? Clairvoyant is the common one that most people know. But we're going to go through all 8. Only 4 today. We'll do 4 next week too. But what's so important about these things? So as you're starting to, you might notice that all of a sudden you might be hearing things and you're like, did you hear that? And nobody else has really heard it. But you're like, no, I either heard a voice or I heard a sound. Or maybe you see something and you're just like, wait, I saw, like, did you see that? Did you see that being? Did you see that entity, that light maybe? Or maybe you just start knowing things. You're like, somebody will come to you and they'll tell you something. You're like, I already knew that. But how did you already know that? And these are things you may not have experienced before. Or maybe you're interested in these things, in honing them. Everybody has an ability. Everybody, you might have multiple ones. Often, if you have one, they come paired or in groups and you have multiple of these. I call them the superpowers. These are the hypersensitivities that until you understand what is happening with you or to you, these can make you feel a little crazy. Crazy making all the way. You can just be like, hey, I don't want to say anything to anybody because maybe they're going to throw me in a white coat and put some pills in my body, right? Because you do feel a little crazy when they're first happening if it's not something you were seeking, not something you were trying. And even then, if you're seeking and you are practicing these different skills and all of a sudden they pop up, you're like, wait, and you question it. You question, is this really happening? You question, is this me or is this something outside of me? Is this what I was actually looking for? We always need to be careful what we ask for because then it can come in tenfold and we weren't ready for it. We did not expect how it was to come out. We did not expect to be doing it to the intensity that we were doing it. And we may not have the support systems in place as much as we thought we did. So that is just my heed the warning. Sometimes we're just thrown into it. I have had these abilities, quite a few of them since I was a child, like young child, like 3, 4, 5, 6. And then my guides, they shut it down for a little bit. They're like, we need to do this for your own self-preservation. I lived in a small town where these things would not be accepted. My parents weren't up on this, no fault to them, but this was not their realm. And so I was shut down for quite a few years by my guides intentionally as self-preservation because I know it would not necessarily have gone very well as these things were coming out and I was hiding them quite a bit from a lot of people. And then they started coming back out again in my 20s and then I wasn't listening and then a car accident. And so that's what I mean by sometimes we don't choose it. Sometimes we're born with it, but sometimes it's kind of like lingering in the background and that's okay. And then when we're not listening to the signs of the divine, all of a sudden, okay, fine, this is what's happening. And you're in a car accident or there's some kind of trauma often that cracks you open and you have no choice but to listen at that point. So just a quick and dirty on my little background there. So yeah, okay. So these superpowers that can come out. So there's 8 of these superpowers. We're going to talk about 4 today, but the 8. So, okay, I have these written down so I wouldn't forget any. Here we go. We got clairvoyance, which is clair seeing. It's like the visual you get in your head when you're like, I can just see it, right? Then we have claircognizance, which is clair knowing. You're like, I just know. It's just there. I don't know why I know. There's no proof. There's nothing around you that's giving you this information. You just know. Then we have clairaudience, which is hearing. You hear things, you hear the voices, you hear the sounds, those kinds of things. Then we have clairempathy. So that is the clear emotional feeling. You can feel the vibration that's going around you that's shifted and changed. Then we have clairsentience, which is the clear physical feeling. This is the feeling you have within your body. So you're actually feeling what these other people are feeling, or your knowing and your indication is this sensation within your body, like that gut feeling. Then we have clairtangency. Clairtangency is clear touch. You feel things, you know things by touching somebody or something. You know, sometimes when you pick up an item and you're just like, whoa, this came from this kind of household. This was owned by this kind of person. Ooh, oh, there's a lot of negative energy on this, right? That's a big one where you're just like, I can feel there's sadness around this. Or you pick something up and you're like, oh, I don't want this, but you don't know why. Clairtangency. Clairsalience, right? So this is clear smelling. All of a sudden you're like, whoa, where is that smell coming from? And all of a sudden you smell your grandma, but you just cleaned your house and nothing in there smells like your grandma. That's your grandma coming to visit. She's passed away maybe. Clairgustance. I love that one. Clairgustance is a clear tasting. So all of a sudden there's a flavor in your mouth. You haven't eaten anything. There's nothing in you. It's not like when you've had garlic and you can taste it for days. No, it's not like that at all. Okay, clairgustance. So today we're going to talk about the first four. And that's the thing. Some of these you may have heard of. Like I said, some of them are very common. And some of them you're like, oh, that makes sense. And there might even be more out there, right? I'd love to know. If there's anything that you've experienced, you're like, oh, I have my knowing by way of this. Let me know. I'm so curious. Okay. So the first one we're going to talk about today is clairvoyance. What did we say this is? Clairvoyance is clear seeing. So this is something that you might be experiencing through really vivid dreams. Maybe you are getting like movie kind of reels in your head and you can actually see full progression of things happening. Because this is all happening through your third eye. And I always kind of picture the third eye, which is right here. I don't like to assume you know. Maybe you're new to all of this. Your third eye is right here, right? I always picture it as kind of like a little, sometimes like a little hole. And so that's the projector and it's going back in. So the divine is giving you information here and then it's into the back of the brain pan. Here, let me draw a little picture. I got my whiteboard here. Okay, so let's see how good my drawing skills are today. So yeah, that's the side of the head. You got your third eye right here-ish, right? So it's this little circle. So the divine is sending in information this way, and then it's being projected back here, like in the movie theater, okay? So that's how I picture it. That's kind of what's happening here. Information being sent in, and then you're getting these movie reels. So that's one way that you can have where are we talking here? Clairvoyance. I was going to say clairsentience. See, that's why I have notes, because if not, I go on tangents. Okay, so clairvoyance. So you might see it as the movie reels, and you just get these images, and you're like, where are these coming? Vivid dreams is huge. Okay, the vivid dreaming is a huge, huge thing. You'll wake up sometimes not even feeling like you've slept. It's like I close my eyes and I'm in a whole other world. I open my eyes and I'm in this realm. It's kind of what's happening, right? So another thing you might be noticing that's happening is you're starting to see things. You're starting to see auras, so like color around people. So how I see auras around people is not as color. I actually see them as like oil on water. And there's different depths to that. It's crazy. But sometimes it's like super murky and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, super fun and lots of activity, right? And super clear sometimes too. But there's like it's like the heat waves coming off. I don't know what's going on with the camera today. That's okay. Maybe it's messages from the divine. Okay, anyways. You might also start seeing beings. You might be seeing divine beings coming in and noticing more of them. And often you can see these through your peripheral vision. So if you're staring directly at them, you're like, oh, I can't see anything. But then you move your eye and you're like, oh, they're right there off in the peripheral. That's often a safety mechanism as well for the first little while. They know. Some of them don't want to freak you out, right? They're like, okay, let's make it so that we're a little more integratable. Is that even a word? But they know that this will make it so it's more acceptable, especially as you're first dipping your toes into these realms. But you might start noticing more and more of these. Okay? So this is how you're receiving your extrasensory messages, your divine messages, is through this vision in your head. So you may also, when you're able to see this way, past, present, and future. And I find that's with any of these techniques, these skills, these superpowers, is you are able to hone them. I will have a book at the end to suggest for you that is super awesome with all of its activities that can help you hone the different skills. Because the more you hone one, the more other things become honed, right? And you increase the abilities in the other ways. So, possible, so like I said, possible to see the past, so precognition. The most common one is seeing right now. So it's that you're gaining more information on something. So somebody's like, there's this thing happening in my life. I'm not quite sure what to do with it. Can I get some direction? You know, like change of life. Maybe a relationship is often a big one. Money is often a big one as well. Jobs are often a big one as well. Or even just like, I'm having these activities and I don't know what to do with them. How do I support myself through this? Or what do I need to do to get through this, right? So, and then there's also seeing the future, past, present, and future. So post-cognition. And you're like, ooh, okay, so this is probably coming up for you. So maybe you're wanting to hone your abilities. I'm like, which one do I focus on honing right now? This one might be good for you to focus in on, right? Your clairvoyance. If you visualize solutions to problems, if you are great with your sense of direction and you can just visualize where you need to go, good with visual spatial problems, and you like I love this one. You like rearranging your furniture. I do it all the time. Or for example, your dishwasher. You like arranging things. You like organizing things spatially. So this might be the one that you want to focus on, that you are going to have the most aptitude for. Okay. So clairvoyance. The next one is claircognizance. So this one is just knowing it. You just know it. I know I had one client once ask me, well, what do you see? So I am clairvoyant, so I get a lot of visuals in my head. And then I get a lot of that information, and this is why I say they're often grouped together, or you use one to support another. So my clairvoyance is supported by clairtangency. But also, there's a knowing. And it took me a minute because I had to actually sit there and be like, how do I know? And I do see current within a person. So it's like I see the energetic. So that's the clairempathic as well. I can see what is shifting in them energetically, sense it. But it's just this knowing. And everybody has a different way of knowing they know. Let me explain that. So, for example, for myself, in my brain, and it took me a while to realize what was happening, but it literally feels like there's this, I don't want to say bucket, but like a weighted thing. And then when it's right, or when the knowing is there, I kind of get the sensation that it goes gunk. And it just kind of like flips down the weight, and it's like, yes, that's correct. That is like, this is information, or this is information that's coming through as I'm downloading stuff, right? So you suddenly know something to be true with claircognizance, but it's not because there's fact or an event happening or anything like that. It's just this thing, and you're like, whoa, okay, that's happening. Like we said, download. So when I get downloads, it's just like that strike of insight, or the download, and you're just like, oh, this is just what it is. No need to question it. It's that knowing. It's that sense of this is exactly right. The other thing that I've noticed a lot as I'm talking to people about this and their sense of knowing, and also helping teach people about their sense of knowing and how to feel it within their body, is you don't feel that mental chatter happening. You're not like, well, what if, and then and then maybe I should, and like there's none of the around the bend and the chatter that happens. None of that. You're just like, oh, yeah, it's just what it is. You also don't feel that like, maybe, within the heart region. You're not like, well, maybe it's this, so maybe I should do that. It's nothing like that whatsoever in your heart, because it's not personal. It's just information that's being given to you through the divine, right? You also might notice that you get this, that nagging sensation. Sometimes you're like, this just doesn't feel right. See how they all interweave? But you're like, this just doesn't feel right. And you're like, I know that person's lying to me. That's just the easiest one. This person's lying to me. I can feel it, but there's no proof or fact. That's a claircognizance. It's a knowing. Now, we don't want to confuse this with Clairempathy or Clairsentience. So Clairempathy, again, is emotional, clear emotional feeling. Clairsentience is the physical. Because the knowing, sometimes when you have this knowing, you have a reaction to the knowing. And you're like, oh, I don't like that. And then all of a sudden you have this feeling coming up. And so the way to go about this is just be very, you have to kind of be more aware of what's happening within your body and just being like, oh, that knowing came. And is it always a knowing and then a feeling? Well, if that's the case, then it's probably the knowing and then you're having a gut reaction or your own personal reaction to whatever that knowing is that was brought to you. Okay. Number 3 is clairaudience. Clairaudience is your hearing. So you might hear something. Don't go down that ramp today. Don't take the normal exit. Let's say you do the same route to work all the time. And then all of a sudden you hear somebody's voice or a voice or a sound and your brain translates it as, don't take that route today, take the next one. You're like, okay. It's easy to fight against these things too when you first hear them because you doubt them. Your thinking mind gets in place. The fetch is like, nah, you're fine, do this. Instead of just going with it and being like, no, I'm going to trust this. Trust this knowledge that's being given to me right now. And you get to work, you get to wherever you're going, and you're like, whoa, I just missed a huge accident, a 5-car pileup, construction, whatever it was. You're like, oh, thanks. Or my favorite is I'm leaving the house, and I'm like, why am I grabbing this file? Or why am I grabbing this tincture? Or, okay, I'm going to grab my big selenite and bring it to the space. I already have selenite in the space. Why do I need that? And I've learned not to question it because inevitably I'll get wherever I'm going. And it was like, oh, I grabbed this book. And then all of a sudden there's a person within my transactions during that day, my interactions, that are just like, I was like, oh, you really need this. Or this tincture is for you. Or I grab a file and then I get to space. I'm like, I'm not even seeing this person today. And then all of a sudden I get a call and they're like, I really need to come in. It's this, I take that as clairaudience because it's like you're being told. It's like, bring that thing. And you're just like, okay. But again, I feel this is like an interlacing with a claircognizance. Because sometimes it's a knowing, but you might hear the tone in your head. So clairaudience can be what you hear in your head or an actual audio. You might actually hear a voice and nobody else is around. You might actually hear a tone external to your head. It's not actually around. Or you might hear the voice in your head. So yeah, this is like hearing the voices in your head and listening to the voices in your head. Truly. That's what I mean about how this can all feel crazy making, because what does our culture say? These things aren't normal, whatever that means. These things aren't right. Stuff these things down because they're abnormal. But you know what? They're becoming more and more common. And we need to support them because the more you support this in you, the less crazy making it feels. It's true. It also depends on the groups you hang out in. Because if people are always telling you that's weird, let's find some support systems that work with you, right? Okay. Clairaudience. So, where are we here? So, how do you know? So, we talked about with the clairvoyance, if you're a visual person, maybe focus on, if you're looking to hone it, maybe look at your clairvoyance, right? If you're a very visual person. But this is so for this one, so for the clairaudience, are you into music? Do you sing a lot? Are you tuned to sounds, tones, rhythms? Easily remember voices. That's a good one. Easily hear it in somebody's voice if they're lying to you, or the words they're saying don't match their intention. The words they're saying don't match their intention. So if you can hear that in their voice, maybe this is the one you want to hone in on. Or maybe this is the one that is being brought up as one of your superpowers. Okay. Number 4. Clairempathy. So this is the clear emotional feeling. So this is when you can sense other people's emotions, thoughts, symptoms. And it's the perception of this change. So it's kind of like, so you know if you walk into a room and somebody's either had a fight, or maybe they've had a hot makeout session, or maybe there's something happening in that room. There's a tension there of some sort, whether it be a high vibe emotion or a denser emotion. And you can sense it when you go in, but you had no idea beforehand. And you're like, something's going on. You can sense it, but you don't necessarily feel it within yourself. That's clairsentience, where all of a sudden you're like, maybe you get really sad, maybe you get really angry. You might have experienced this if you've ever gone out on a date with someone, and not the clairsentience. You go out on a date with somebody and they really are into you, and you're like, oh, I'm totally into them. But then when you leave their presence, you're like, oh, I actually am not that attracted to them, or I'm not that into them. And you realize later on, it's because you were feeling their emotions. That's clairsentience. That's not empathic. Now, if you just sense their attraction and you were just like, oh, I can sense their attraction, I can feel it underneath, that's clairempathic. So sense versus actually feel it. And it's like you're sensing the shift in vibration. You're very attuned to the energetic fields and how they're shifting. So maybe they're doing this and then you see this. But that's different than what's happening. Oh, I can't see it. That's different than what's happening in the rest of the room. You can sense the vibrational shift. It's like a pebble in the water, and you're like, ooh, I can sense the ripples that are coming out from that. Empathy is it's actually very a common thing, and that's, I feel, the one that's trained up the most in people, or that is the most easy to access, is learning to sense the vibrational shifts that are occurring in other people. Okay. So let's see. This one, really important. If this is one of your main superpowers, or you feel that this is what's coming up, self-care is so important. Because it's easy to take on that stuff, for your energetics to shift that vibration. And you're like, oh, why do I feel disoriented? Because you're sensing it and then taking it on as your own, which is different than perceiving it. Sentience, experiencing it as actually your own emotion automatically. This is where the vibration is actually starting to affect yours, and you're like, what is going on? Right? So super important, self-care and protection against psychic attacks. So I want to go over real quick here. This is one of my favorite techniques to actually bring things in so that you can protect your energetic boundaries. Okay, so that it's harder for it to be adjusted and manipulated based on the vibration that is near you that you are picking up on. I call it the aura manipulation technique. So basically, you picture yourself with two layers, okay? The first layer goes out like heat waves. I talked earlier about heat waves, and you see them off the cement. There's no color to them, but they're making things behind them wavy. So you have one layer like that. The second layer is your colored layer. It can be whatever color you picture. I always picture mine butter yellow. Right now it's a little lavender, apparently. It's like lavender up here, but then like buttery yellow going on down here. So you have the two layers. The reason you have the two layers is because you want to be able to manipulate them separately. So the heat wave layer, you picture going out as far as you want. Let's say it's like filling my apartment, or filling even further than that into the next apartment. Oh, I'm going to bring that in. I don't actually like putting it out to the other apartments, but you can put it out as far as you want. And then the colored layer, you can put it out that far, you can keep it in. Now, the reason why you adjust these separately is because a lot of the protection techniques out there make you feel like you're cut off from everything. Everything. So you're like, great, I'm protected, but now I feel like I'm not connected to anything. Protected and disconnected. Because you put up this like iron barrier. Nothing can get in, nothing can get out. But we still want some things to come in. And we still want some things to go out. We still want to be able to allow our heart to connect to others in whatever capacity we want. So the color layer, I kind of think like, I consider it to be like perfume, if you wear perfume or a scent. Spray it, walk through it. So the only people that are going to be able to connect to it are the people that you allow up to here and super close, right? If they're 5 feet away from you, they're not going to be able to get in that close. So that is your layer of these are the people that are allowed to connect into me, that I'm going to let my heart connect to. So maybe you bring it right up to here and nobody can actually connect into that, but that's okay because you're still going to feel connected and part of the whole because of your heat wave layer. That's the more still connected on a collective consciousness kind of level, but less personal level. And you could bring that one in too, because picture, so like right now I can put mine way out and I'm connecting to the cat, I'm connecting to the plants in the house, right? But if I'm at the bus stop downtown, I'm not going to put my heat wave layer to either end of the block because you know how many people are going to walk through that? So I'm going to then pull that one in as well. Sometimes, let's say I'm having a dinner party and I really, really want to connect deeply with everybody that's there. I'll put both layers out really far and I'll be connecting in with everybody to that depth. But if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can pull it back in, but still leave the heat wave one out. And so I'm still connecting, but less, I have more protection there, right? Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Make sure you practice this before you go out and try and do it out and about. The more you practice this, it's something I don't even consider anymore. I've been doing this one. I was actually gifted the basics of this from a person, oh my goodness, how many years ago now? Like 9 years ago? And it was random. I was working at Chapters at the time, and this guy came up and time dissolved, like 20 minutes. There was no time in existence. And him and I had this very in-depth divine conversation. I called him John, but that wasn't his name. And he goes, "It's okay, you know me as John." Like, it was this intense. It was one of those moments in my life I was like, oh my goodness. And I had all these things happening to me. Kundalini was coming upon me so often. I would be like laid out flat in the back room at work because I would be just enraptured with Kundalini. And he's like, "Here you go. Here's a technique." And he told me the basics, and then I started working with it. And the more I worked with it, the more now it's literally just second nature. I'll be out and I won't even think about it because it's kind of running in the background all the time. But you need to practice this. So practice it at home first. Get your bearings about how, and then consciously practice it when you go out and see what feels right and what doesn't. So this is a really good technique. There's lots of other techniques out there as well, for protection and also for clearing your aura and stuff like that. That's another video another time, I'm sure. Okay, so that's the first 4 that we've talked about. We've talked about clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, and clairempathy. Stay tuned for the next 4. That'll be next week. What'll we be talking there? We're going to be talking about clairsentience, clairtangency, clairsalience, and clairgustance. I just like saying clairgustance. Okay, so much love and Stardust, and I will talk to you soon. Check out below. I'm going to have my contact information. If you have any other questions or curiosities or you want to book a session, hit me up. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.